Happy Earth Day, Ed Lyons.
Happy Earth Day.
Our discussion today will be about the politics of climate science. About 10th on the list of important issues that we face in our world today. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's funny. You picked a good number. I mean, what's funny about the environment is that the politics can become kind of distorted versus the economics. Our last podcast, we talked about how economics is important in healthcare, and strangely, economics is very important in terms of climate science, in terms of evaluating what are the important problems for humanity working on. And what's nice is there are a bunch of really excellent economists who said, climate change is important, but it's actually not in the top 10 important problems that humanity could address from an economic point of view.
Who said that?
So I'm an old school climate politics guy, and in the 90s, there was a very famous guy who left Greenpeace because he couldn't handle the politics. His name was Bjorn Lomborg. He became famous for writing a book in the 90s called The Skeptical Environmentalist, saying he had severely doubted the left's gospel on climate and that he thought that they were ruining the political case for a sensible environmental management. It came out against the environmental people and was very skeptical of global warming in the 90s based on the science at that time. He then left the world of climate, and by the way, his book was outstanding. He left that and decided that he would form a group called the Copenhagen Consensus, which would be a bunch of economists looking at the environment, specifically at climate change, and saying, for every dollar invested, how does climate change rank with the other pressing problems of humanity? And they put out a long list of important human problems, everything from,
starvation,
dysentery, starvation,
disease,
dengue fever, a whole lot of things, and said, where does climate rank in terms of where humanity should be focusing attention? And they made an excellent, I thought, airtight case to say that the climate change isn't even in the top 10 things humanity should be doing, even though politics don't reflect that. So he became head of a group of economists called the Copenhagen Consensus that said, you can believe that climate change is real and that we're causing it, but still think it's way less important than a whole bunch of other things that are a whole lot less sexy. And I thought that was really interesting. So again, as economics should inform our healthcare debates, as we said in our last podcast episode, Lomborg was a big fan, as I am, of saying the fact that economics matters in climate too, and the politics have become unhinged from the economics on the left.
Without question.
Well, that's pretty radical. I think it's true, but it's not. Most people don't believe that.
No. The politics becoming unhinged
from the economics.
From the economics.
Yeah, I'm for that.
But that's for the natural. I think that's a part of what I'm going to say is the natural progression of the left. You used a word in that very long monologue. I'm not knocking it.
That was good, though.
Just giving you a hard time. You used a word that I think is appropriate. It's apropos. Gospel. There is a definite religiosity to the left's obsession with the climate. Obsession with the environment. There's a bit of that Mother Earth hippie-ish thing going on, but there's definitely the religion, organized religion has been pushed aside, and this religion of the earth has supplanted it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah,
in large scale, not just on the fringes. I mean, in large proportions.
Yes, it's religious in the sense that they put out certain truths that are not meant to be questioned.
Good. That's a good way to put it. Okay. Now, for the record, I certainly believe in climate change.
Jeff Simone is admitting that the thermometers around the world are not lying to us.
No, certainly. There cannot be any doubt that the chemicals and pollutants that we put into our atmosphere affect our atmosphere as they do when we affect our water and our soil. There is debate to the degree of which they affect it and how much they impact it. I'm not going to get into that because I don't. There is definitive disagreement in the scientific community on how much. There's the infamous and famous 98% of scientists agree that climate change is impacting, or man is affecting climate change. Okay, so, or well, I think the wording they used was at the time significantly. Now, if Ed, I were to say to you, I'm going to take away a significant amount of your income, and you say, "Oh shit, Jeff," maybe I'll bleep that out. I want to stop cursing on the podcast. By the way, I changed my mind. And you say, "Wow, what's a significant amount?" And maybe you think it's 40%, and I say 15%. Okay, well that's significant, but it's not a lot. So I don't know that I agree with the UN that says amazingly 50% of the world's climate change is caused by man. Perhaps it's lower, or perhaps it's more. I think that the consensus we can build with reasonable people who are not adhering to the gospel of environmentalism is that the solutions that they propose always seem to how should I say, dovetail into socialism and communism. And I think before we get into more of the politics of it, I think right therein lies the problem, because there's a tremendous amount of talk, and perhaps you're going to go to these rallies on the Common today. I am not.
Yes.
And I'd be curious to see what they say, if they focus on the idea of agreement on the diagnosis does not necessarily correspond with agreement on the prescription.
That's huge.
Because you can get, I think, a vast middle population of people, of voters, of people who say, yes, I want to protect the environment. Sure, what we do impacts our climate. Sure, all of those things. I think there's a lot. What do we do about it? Well, the extremists on the left will say, well, end capitalism. Capitalism is the problem. Well, no, actually, capitalism is the solution. We can get into that in a bit. But I think therein lies the problem with the climate debate. We are in intractable trench warfare where conceding points to the other side will be viewed upon as enabling the other side. Brief tangent, I think you can draw conclusions along those lines with the left and Trump, who cannot let up for a second for fear that they may be enabling him. But I think that's the same rationale, the same mentality that is taking place on the right and the left that says we cannot agree with the other side. Ergo, we may be agreeing with their prescription, their solution for the issue. It is a huge problem. We're going to solve it on the Lincoln Review podcast today.
I think the biggest thing that has gone wrong in this debate is what psychologists and argumentation experts call solution aversion, which is that you're concerned that buying into one thing will result in a solution you don't want.
Yes.
It's a huge problem for both sides, the left and the right, on various issues. For instance, on the left, they may like the idea of entitlement reform, but they're scared the fact it results in a solution they don't like. On the right, we're so nervous that if we sound like we're pro-environment, that we're going to accidentally agree with what Al Gore says. So I like to point out today that in this state, that there's this wonderful March for Science in Boston. I'm going to go
nationwide. The March for Science is going on. I believe it is a nationwide event.
No, it is. I'm sorry.
All these marches are taking place.
It's nationwide, but as we are
the
smartest and most educated city in the entire country, as surveys have shown,
and
as we are loaded with scientists of all kinds, that the recent discomfort that scientists are feeling right now politically means there are a lot of people who are on the train with me. I was on the train down here to the Lincoln pub, but everyone else is headed to the march. I'm going to go there after that. And I just think that that I'm amazed the fact that while the Massachusetts Democratic Party is talking about the rally, helping everyone get there, talking about it, the Mass GOP, my friends at Merrimack Street, are saying nothing about the March for Science is insane, because most Republicans I know are pro-science. They want clean air. They want clean water. They don't like pollution. They want their kids to play in safe spaces, but it's just not in our DNA to outwardly say we care about the environment, because we're so worried about looking like we're for extremism, we don't say anything, which is ceding the entire issue to the left, which is stupid, because we care about the environment in a way.
There is, yes, we are doing that, but there's reasons why I think we're doing that. I think a primary reason is when you get into it with any of maybe I won't even say nut job environmentalists, but if you even get into something reasonable, get into it with somebody reasonable, there is this, again, what was the phrase you used? It escapes me at the beginning. Agreement, aversion,
Solution aversion.
solution
It's a
aversion.
thing.
Excuse me. It slipped my mind. But yes, the solution aversion that people face, because first, it's like everything climate change is real.
Therefore, X.
Therefore, but
I don't like X.
But the thing is, they'll never say X publicly. Or
But you know what they mean, though.
but I do know what they mean, and that's the problem. Where it's just they go, climate change is real. Do you agree? And it's like, you meekly raise your hand and go, well, yeah, but I have a feeling you're not saying something after that. You know, that's.
But sometimes they come out and say it.
Sometimes they do, which means we must end capitalism.
Return to the caves and trees.
Yeah, or right, or everybody move back to the farm. Yeah, well, no,
Sure.
no. I mean, but see.
We don't have to do that,
So,
though.
but the thing is, that debate never takes place. That debate never takes place. It because we're so entrenched in our echo chambers, where I could maybe some hippy dippy person, I'd be like, no, look, the idea of advancements in science and improvements in agriculture and improvements in energy and improvements in the scientific, the capitalism and free markets that enable all of this growth. And yes, there's drawbacks, but there's also benefits, and we can invent our way out of it. I forget where.
Absolutely.
Maybe it was Einstein or somebody who said, first man invented fire. Or some. Well, I'm going to get this wrong, but man was in the cave, or man needed shelter, so man went in the cave. Man was cold in the cave, so he invented fire. So and then he was choking on the smoke, so he invented the chimney.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Right, and necessity is the mother of invention. So we can invent our way out of this.
But we are.
And we are.
Cross the river to MIT, and they're
but-
inventing our way out of climate change.
But the politics of it is what prevents it, because you have this orthodoxy by Democrats that they even if you say, okay, yes, Elizabeth Warren, I agree that climate change is a real problem. Okay, what are we going to do about it? And it's almost like, well, we're not. That's where the conversation ends. It goes, climate change is a problem. Is it the most important problem? It must be the most important problem facing you. And it's the repetition of all the ills of society. And we never get to that debate of what next. And now some folks say, well, we must just tax carbon to the nth degree. Okay, well, people will freeze to death. The economy will slow down. When the economy slows down, the long-term aspect for growth and innovation and solutions to this all become eroded. We know what better ways can come out of this. Yes, you should. Well, in a second, I'm gonna put a pin in my thought. But how do we break that down? Because I don't see anybody on the left who might even agree with me and say, okay, we agree that there's a problem in the world with pollution and how it affects the climate. What do we do about it? Who else? Who is there to have a conversation besides Jeff and Ed talking about climate change?
Well, there are lots of people, including scientists themselves. I think that.
But again, this is on the politics of it, because politics is an policy. I mean, sure, we can get a lot of science, but who can thoroughly diagnose the problem better than I'm probably able to comprehend it? But how do we solve it?
But you know something? What's funny is every time there's a scientist who decides on the left to get involved in politics, it's scandalized in right-wing media. Look, scientists are political. I remember.
But what if those scientists have the wrong solution?
Some do. They're just scientists. Scientists aren't politicians. And whenever I see scientists barging into politics, I want to say, you're out of expertise here. And that the small number of scientists who decide to walk into the public square on politics, I want to say, I don't, despite the fact that I studied science as an undergrad, I'm a computer scientist and I follow scientists closely, I don't tend to tell scientists what to think about science. And as more of a political expert, I don't expect scientists to tell me how to do politics, because they don't realize politics is way more complicated than they think it is. And the small number of scientists who wade into politics usually do it and mess up. And I don't think scientists should do politics.
But this is where, if we want to cut to the chase, this is where the rubber meets the road, okay? Because a scientist can tell you all day long till they're blue in the face what's wrong and what's causing a problem. essentially carbon emissions, right? I mean, that's
So-
what
so-
we would agree that
Well, I
climate
mean,
change, carbon
it's-
emissions.
Carbon emissions is one of the big things.
Right.
It's other things, but
Okay,
that's
but that's one of the big. So there's other factors.
sure.
But the left's proposal to that is okay, incredibly get rid of certain industries, tax the hell out of fossil fuels and carbon emission fuels, and subsidize green energy. Now,
it's way more than that. But yes,
well,
I include
but
those things.
that's
It's-
kind of the
I'll
three-legged
step back.
stool
It's
of it.
big government top-down mandates.
Yes,
That includes many other things we didn't even say.
Okay, but I've consulted in the green energy industry, in the solar industry. It's very slow going. It is not something that if you could put billions, they put billions and billions into it. It's not going to happen overnight. For solar power, also half the day there's this thing called nighttime, and where you're not going to be generated power. So you need to. The idea of green energy can be used as a supplement. I'm not necessarily for subsidizing it because then you get into the crony capitalism we saw in the last 8 years. But there can be ways to encourage it and get those things to market that over the long term, more fuel efficient, light bulbs in cars, things like that, more energy efficient appliances. Over time, those types of mandates I'm sort of okay with. But other types of mandates I'm not. I'm definitely not okay with massive carbon taxes because that usually, those are spread across the board and usually passed on to consumers, who the little old lady trying to pay their heating bill gets hit with that. And plus, you'll see rises in food costs. You'll see rises in costs of everything.
So let me stop. Let me stop with a quick anecdote.
Yeah.
So my kids and I were in Mattapan yesterday, which is a low-income black neighborhood in Boston, and I was talking with a woman at the Tavon Matthews Tot Lot in Mattapan, and we were talking about that the day was warm, and there's a young black woman with children talking to me with my kids, and we're in this community a lot for different reasons. It's a long story, and she was saying, she's like, man, she goes, the warm weather, she goes, I just got to get that bill down. And she meant like her oil heating bill, because I have oil too. And she was like, I just got to get, she says, boy, not much to help my family more than making that bill go down.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I thought to myself, here's the woman saying, when the weather gets warm, someone like me who's financially comfortable says, it's a warm day. Someone like her is saying, oh, thank God that bill's going to go down.
Yeah.
Right? So any environmental solution that makes that woman's bill in Mattapan go up, I want to say, are you sure about that? Right? So I just think that it's like economics. We say, how does this affect the actual person, or what are people's incentives? So I'm a real environmentalist, and I believe in climate change. I believe that it matters, but I still believe in economics. I think that I like seeing environmental successes where the economics work. So lighting and LEDs have moved from being expensive and impractical to being cheap and flexible. Every bulb in my house, many colors, many sizes, replaced with LEDs. Suddenly, I'm paying 80% less for lighting with cheap bulbs, and the economics work perfectly. And now suddenly, cutting energy use from the coal-fired power plants near my house is easy, because I install the LED bulbs, replace the incandescents, and I save money, and it all works out. And I love it when environmentalism makes sense. I can tell my neighbors, go buy some LED bulbs. They're wonderful. The different colors. It works great. Go do save energy. Win, win, win.
Yeah.
Government doesn't have to mandate me telling my neighbor.
Well, the government actually did mandate the bulbs, but yeah.
So I'm trying to think, how do I get into the 15-second version of this? So the Congress decided to phase out incandescent bulbs about 2 years too soon, before the market was ready.
Yeah.
The Republicans, when they got control of Congress about 9 years ago, shut it down, restarted again. It was a big mess. And by the time they sort of got it back together again, the industry had the technology to make the government ban work. But I like talking about the light bulb as an example of when, if you can get the cost down, the aspirations of the left actually become practical.
Right.
Right.
But
the economics not work.
The weird confluence. But somebody ate that cost. I mean, yes, okay. It's a question of trade-offs, right? So clearly, the mandate to change the light bulb had some costs associated to it. Was
a bit
cost
too soon?
Was that cost dire and impactful enough. No law was passed, by the way. I don't believe it was there a law passed.
Yeah, it
saying
passed. The Republicans,
or was it a rule? Was it a regulation?
No, it was.
I think
The Democrats literally killed it. The Republicans, the light bulb manufacturers got scared. A year and a half later, the Republicans canceled it and then reenacted it again. It was really confusing, but basically
I thought that was your hero Cass Sunstein's doing the light bulb thing. I thought he was involved with that as a regulation.
I don't know that.
All right.
He is my hero, but this was not a regulation. This was
in case you think this is a one-sided podcast.
This wasn't a regulation by the EPA. This was an actual separate law passed by Congress. I want to say it was in 2004, and that it was a little too early for me. And the light bulb manufacturers revolted. When Republicans got Congress again, they undid it, but then did it again. And that by the time they got it fixed, suddenly the LEDs were real and it was okay. But it was a good case study in the tension between what's realistic versus what Washington wants. And I think, fortunately, this was a minor error, being that the LED manufacturers caught up, where Washington often makes mistakes where the economy is not ready at all. So one of the things that changed in politics is that we're ending 8 years of the White House saying, we're going to drag America into international climate change agreements that economics don't support, that the Congress won't support, but we're going to do them anyway.
Right.
And even though I am absolutely in favor of addressing climate change, I have never liked the idea of the White House sending bureaucrats to European cities to agree on agreements that either won't work or that countries will cheat upon or the economics won't support it. So as Lomborg says, if it costs $14 per ton to get carbon dioxide out of the air, that the agreements don't mean anything because everyone will cheat and not do it.
Yeah.
If America can invent technologies to get the cost way, way down, then the politics are easy.
Yeah.
But I don't believe in creating fake agreements that nobody's willing to honor that make it seem like we're addressing climate change when the Congress hasn't agreed. So I'm okay with the end of this sort of like Obama's approach of sort of dragging America against its will into these agreements. I don't think that works. I bring up the LED light bulb example to say we understand what it looks like when the economics are there. And I love talking about natural gas because what's hilarious is that natural gas has become like this huge answer to the problem. And because the left doesn't like natural gas, they're sort of like against it, which is bizarre.
Well, that's what I wanted to touch on a bit. There are two fuels that would literally solve a lot of this. Natural gas, you can run automobiles on natural gas.
Fracked gas.
Frack gas, and yes, frack safely, but fracking in and of itself is not an actual problem.
It's what we need.
Bad fracking. Fracking done poorly is a problem, but fracking done properly really isn't. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ed. Natural gas emits a third, not reduction by a third, but an entire third of, say, oil, and definitely coal. It cuts it by 66%. That is huge. Nuclear power, no emissions. Yes, there's radioactive waste, but now they're even inventing ways to deal with the radioactive waste and turn that into energy too in these small little power plants. Science solving it, but try having that conversation with somebody on the left, or with, maybe not natural gas. Natural gas, you can have that conversation with somebody on the left. They will be adamant about it. They'll have watched that Matt Damon movie and moronically nodded in agreement, and like David Letterman says, they're setting the water on fire because they saw a piece of propaganda film. That's a problem. You can get into the NIMBYism of nuclear power. I say that nuclear power is the answer. Do I want a nuclear power plant necessarily within 25 miles of my house? If I'm being honest, probably not.
I wouldn't mind.
Okay, well there you go. I'd say probably
not.
not.
Frack gas is so cheap.
Yeah.
It's even sabotaging the business models of the nuclear plants.
We have oceans of natural gas under our soil in the domestic United States, the continental United States. It can solve our energy problems. We are just about energy independent from at the end of the George Bush.
Thank God you mentioned that.
And which is fantastic. I mean, oh my God,
this
was something.
This was something. Geopolitics.
Yes, this is something that I can remember being at the end of 2007, thinking to myself, we're in such a problem because we are so reliant on the Saudis and the Kuwaitis for that oil. that we have now.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
And that is so huge.
That
the
is
media doesn't talk about that.
That is such a we must become energy independent. I remember when Barack Obama ran for his term, and I remember folks like Gingrich talking about it in 2012. But needless to say, it actually occurred because of fracking, because of natural gas. That is huge. That for geopolitics, that is a such a monumental event.
And the media doesn't talk about
and we
the political significance of natural gas. It is nothing less than a revolution in politics and energy.
Absolutely. And it can solve a lot of our problems. But
it is already solving our problems.
I had a point that is escaping my mind.
So listen, one of the reasons why we can press Iran harder on the weapons agreement is because we don't need their oil. People don't sort of connect these dots.
Right.
It's huge, but because it's a fossil fuel, it's like the skunk at the party for the left. They didn't plan on natural gas riding to the rescue here. And I think it's funny that between natural gas and nuclear, we have some great answers to climate change that the religion, as you said, of the left won't accommodate because it's heresy. No, it was supposed to be solar and algae. It wasn't supposed to be
natural gas.
It was supposed to be fracking. And you want to say, we have 500 coal-fired power plants in America, that's the actual number, that are going nowhere. We have a revolution in natural gas. Wind and solar are fantastic. They're getting cheaper. It's wonderful. But the reality is, here's the thing. I often joke that Republicans don't spend enough time with the scientists on climate change, and the left spends no time with anybody who's actually in the energy industry. Nobody who's in the energy industry thinks that we're moving to a solar, wind, and algae-based culture anytime in the next 20 years. But even though wind is getting better, do you know how many windmills, the new 3-blade carbon fiber windmills, it takes to replace one coal-fired power plant? It's 3,000 to 4,000 windmills.
Yeah, it's not scalable. It's not scalable.
Never mind the fact that the wind isn't. Never mind the fact that the wind isn't the same in the whole country. That wind is not going to do it, and no serious person thinks that. Solar has gotten way better. The cost of photoelectric solar panels has gotten so cheap, it's dropped like 60 to 70% in cost in the past 6 years.
Sure.
Thanks to China, right? And you want to say that solar is now doing so well, I don't even think it needs to be subsidized anymore. That's a whole other podcast. But the point is that even though solar is getting better, problems with batteries, again, the private sector, Elon Musk and others, are dealing with it. But even with solar doing very well, nobody thinks fossil fuels are going anywhere. It's mainly because American energy consumption is a moving target. Like it goes up like a certain percentage a year, and that even if solar and wind do better...
Does it? But does our energy consumption go up every year? I don't necessarily know that it does.
Not during recessions. But when the economy is healthy, it goes up every year. All the computers...
No, but think about that for a second. Think about that. Our energy consumption, not necessarily our activity net, because
it goes up.
every year, our cars become more efficient, our light bulbs become more efficient.
You bet you get what economists call demand inducement.
Yeah, sure. There is that factor.
You overconsume because it's cheaper. You get that too.
Okay. But the point being is, in the past, I believe, you might know this, over the past 10 years, we've had a net reduction in the United States carbon emissions by about 7% because of natural gas.
The emissions thing is not the same as overall.
No. I'm moving on. I'm moving on to actual emissions. Yeah, not consumption, but I'm talking about. Imagine that we have increased our energy consumption by probably a moderate amount, but we have actually reduced our carbon emission. So there is a split in the divide. Now, back to the politics.
I can do better. In the past 10 years, we have not had the climate change reducing agreements that Europe has. But America, without a national climate change policy, has reduced emissions more than Europe has with a climate change target that they failed to meet. What does that mean? It means that American innovation and change in source has resulted in a lower emissions target than Europe, where they agreed to a target they couldn't make and failed upon because we had better innovation than they did and didn't require an agreement. So what I'm saying is that The left's saying if we could just get the right agreements in place at the national, international level, we solve the problem. Where America did better than Europe's agreements without having the agreements. Because we just shifted our sources better and our conservation better than they did.
And not because President Obama mandated to be so. That's critical. Not because the government passed legislation and made this to be so.
No, we don't pass legislation. Don't forget.
No, well.
No. President Obama has gone alone.
Not passed. You're correct. You're correct. Not because there was a government executive order in place of it. My point being is, planet-wide, globally, what's contributing to the amount of fossil fuel consumption and carbon emission is really not. I mean, we still are a polluter. We still do it, but we're getting better.
China is now worse than us.
But China and India and Russia.
I have some data. China adds 5 coal.
But we're less than 20%, I want to say, and we consume a lot more resources, and we're way better at the emissions.
We are less than 20%.
Yeah.
But we're also not growing to the degree that China and the BRICS countries are doing. China adds 5 coal-fired power plants per week.
Really?
Per
Wait,
week.
Whoa. Time out.
That's the truth.
That's per week. Okay.
Per week.
It's
from The Economist. I'll look. I swear
you
to you.
that just doesn't per
China,
a coal fire, a giant monstrosity of a coal fire. I'm questioning that just by pure
a week
smell test.
I'm not guessing. A week.
We're posting that in the show notes because
no.
you have to stand up an entire coal-fired power plant.
China has poured more concrete in the past 12 years than America did in the entire 20th century.
I'm not doubting that. They have the ghost cities. Vice News does a great report on the ghost cities. I'm not doubting that.
I'm just saying.
What I'm questioning is the idea that so 52 weeks a year, you're telling me there's 250 300 coal-fired power plants that are being created per year in China. The scalability of that just seems a little bit off.
Don't forget, they started from having almost none, and we have 500.
We'll post the link in the podcast. That's what's great about.
I'm just saying that China. Again, it's like I just said that China poured more concrete in the past 12 years than we did in the entire 20th century in America. China is modernizing at a scale that we can't even imagine here.
I think. Well, you know what? Maybe we'll have a separate podcast on China. A lot of that is Potemkin. But
I just mean that we're no longer We're no longer the leading cause of greenhouse gas emissions in the world.
And in fact, we're going in the other direction. We are. So
I just mean that it matters. We are now in a global economy, and it isn't all up to America anymore the way it might have been 50 years ago.
And a good point that you let off with that I'll close with. Republicans and conservatives cannot be afraid of this argument.
What?
You cannot be afraid of this argument, of this discussion, of the whole climate science argument. You cannot be afraid of it.
We have to be involved.
We have to be involved in
it
and take the lead on it because we can, because we are the reasonable
our story
ones.
Out there.
We are the reasonable ones in this, and people need to know what has led to less pollution. People need to know what has led to more innovation. People need to know what hasn't worked, the government mandates. People need to know what does actually work, which is the free market taking hold, and it's okay to pass laws that say companies cannot do X because it pollutes. That's okay. I think everybody, barring some maybe anarchist radicals, some greedy businessmen, as they're said on the left, we can all agree to say companies can't pollute and leave it at that. But when we get into the concept of the government must decide what's the best way to allocate our resources, that is when we tend to diverge. And I'll put this out there. If any person on the left wants to come on and talk about this, I'd invite them to, because the concepts that we're talking about are real. They can happen at a state level. They can happen at a national level. But we need to actually start bridging that divide and break down the echo chambers of what we want to do when we talk about climate science and the environment itself.
But again, we can look to our own Republican governor for sensible solutions and compromises. So Baker came into office in 2014 saying, climate change is real, I think it matters, but we can't do crazy things. And he has been a remarkable, thoughtful analyst of the problem in this state. The left is all about move everything at any cost you want to solar renewables and just let the consumers have it. Baker has said, whoa, we already have the highest electricity costs in New England. I am not going to read anything that raises them way more than that. And he has kept the left at bay, but yet made good long-term decisions. So he said, I think we need more hydropower from Canada. And the left says, well, that's not Massachusetts. All these fake things. No, we're going to do it with hydropower from Canada, even though the left didn't go for it here. He said, we need more natural gas because otherwise the price will be too high.
This is one of my favorite stories.
What?
This is one of my favorite stories about the natural gas pipeline.
Yeah. So, but Baker has basically said is, look, you can't kill all the pipelines and then get upset the fact that everyone's heating bills are this high. He said you have to realize they're all related, which they are. It's economics again. And so Baker has been fantastic about the fact that, look, it's my job to make sure everyone can afford the power that literally makes Massachusetts work. And then factor in what environmentalists want, but don't wreck the economy. So Baker has been saying, hey, I'm an environmentalist. Matt Beaton, Secretary of the Energy and Environment, has been good. Baker's been a sensible mediator between goals about the environment and what that woman pays for oil down in Mattapan. I think Baker has been the Republican person to say, are the economics there? Are we getting ahead of what people can afford? But still, let's be sensible. So I think Baker has been the pro-environmental businessman that I respect completely. And so I just think that we need to get back to what Baker is doing, to say, energy powers everything we do, and we can't just pretend that it's just some leisure pursuit. But yet we have to care about the environment. And Baker has been a good broker, and I think that that's the model, which is that admit we have to move in this direction, move there, but be sensible and don't give in to the religion of the left. Baker has been great on that.
Well said. Not much I can add to that, but I do hope we can bridge that divide. I hope we can delve into this. I hope more Republicans do when we talk about issues, and we get into it on a deeper level and not just the drive-by, pass-by kind of 10,000-foot level, because this does need to be discussed, and there is a wide swath, I suspect, of people in the middle of the road that probably can agree on a lot of the things we want to do, but maybe don't talk about. And the fringes on either side need to be shut down a little bit and be put in their place. Yes. On that note, we are going to end this episode of the Lincoln Review podcast. I forgot to remind people on the last episode, subscribe to us on iTunes. Subscribe to us on SoundCloud. Download the SoundCloud app for your smartphone. Check us out on YouTube, because we are doing this now on video. You get to see our smiling faces. And share it with your friends. Share it on your Facebook page. Share it in social media. And lastly, if you are a liberal progressive and have some notoriety and you'd like to have a discussion with us about an issue, I'm going to invite you on. Tweet at us. Our Twitter handles are on the show notes. Ed Lyons, happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day. I'll be headed to Boston Common soon. If you see the slightly drunk moderate Republican on Boston Common, that will be me.
We'll decide whether to do a third episode sitting here. Cheers.